Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Dr. Munder. Today we'll talk about user-defined method, which will cover learning outcome number 10. In this lecture, we'll talk about how we define a method, what's the type of the method, and also what's the difference between user method and built-in method, and what is the difference between argument and parameters, and also we have the main method. What is the difference between user-defined method and the main method? So let's start by that. The method basically is just a block of code that will execute a specific task. So we call it sometimes function, sometimes we call it method, and so on. We have two types of methods. We have built-in method and we have user-defined methods. Now, the built-in method is actually included in the package. And when you ever use any method, you have to say import to the package that include the method. So if you want to use the IO method, you explore the java.io. If you want to use the scanner method, you can use the java .scanner and other methods. It's all automatically included in the java.lang package, so you don't have to write them. So they already there. There's a lot of library and the classes there that you can use and which is built on, because Java is just a collection of library that you can use whatever library you need in your program. User-defined method basically use this syntax. Okay, use this syntax. Use the modifier, and then you put the return type and the name of the method, and then you have to put the parameter. Modifier could be like a public, for example, or private. Okay, when we say public, that means what? That means this method will be used by everyone. If it's a private, it's only used by this class. Now, return type, it could be any primitive type, such as, for example, integer or double or any type or string or character or any type. Okay, so we have two options. You have the type, and you have also you can put void. Okay, if you put void, that means does not return anything. Okay, the method does not return anything. If you put an integer character or something like that, then the method, it will return a value with the same type that you put it as a return type. And then here the name of the method, you can call it it's open name, any name you can call it, but remember, no space, no keyword can be used, and so on. Now you can send some values to the function that the function need in order to do the task, and these values, or these stored in variables, we call these parameters. Okay, and you can put as many parameters as you want, and you have to mention the type of the parameter and the name of the parameter, and then you open a bracket and you close the bracket, and this is the code for the function. This is the method for the function. Now we already explained these things. Okay, so the method, for example, here a method called addition, and you can see this is a public method that anyone can use it, and it does not return anything. When you see void, that means there is no return. There is no return anything. So this function is called addition. The name of the function is addition. This is the name of the function, and you give it two values, a and b, and both of them are what? An integer. So the function should receive two values, and these values will be stored in a and will be stored in b as well. And this function, let's say for example you send them 2 and 3 as well, so the function will use a equal 3 and a equal 2 and b equal 3. We'll do the sum. The sum will be equal to what? To 5, which is the sum of them, and then the system will print this statement. How do you call the function? Very simple and easy. You just write addition, the name of the function, and you can just write the name of the function, give it 2 and 3 the values, and the function will print the statement and do the calculation. This is a function that takes parameter and does not return anything. So it is independent. It does the task and does not return anything. Another function here, that function, for example, here it is public, and it is public function that anyone can use it. It has a return type. The return type is what? Is an integer. So when you see a return type, any type, you will expect to find a return statement, okay? And return statement will return a value, and this is return a variable, and this variable has to be the same type. It has to be what? Integer, because it will return only integer. If you look here, mul is actually an integer. You can see this function does not take any parameter at all, okay? So the function is itself contain I, it contain j, and I is equal 10 and j equal 5, and you calculate the mul here. The mul will be equal to what? J, which is equal to 50, and it will return it. So when you call the function, you call it by its name, multiply. But there's one thing, because there's no parameter given to the function, because the function return an integer, so you have to, the value from the function has to be stored in an integer variable. So when the function called, it will do the calculation, and mul return will be returned and will be saved into this variable with the same type as the return type of the function. Here, for example, okay, we have a function called difference. Okay, and this function is a public, and so it has a return type integer. So you expect to see what? We expect to see a return statement of def, and def is basically what? In def is an integer number. It has to be an integer because the return type is an integer. This function accepts two variables, a and b, with the type integer. So it will take a and b from outside. So the value from a coming from outside, the value from b coming from outside. And let's say you call the function and you say, for example, difference. You write the function difference, okay, and you give him 2 and what? And 3 value, because it is return type is integer. So we have to say what? X, integer x, for example, equal the function. So here we'll take 2 and 3 will be saved. So here will become 3 will come, and 2 will come into a. So different is empty here as integer. This is def. Now if a is greater than b, 2 is greater than 3, no, then it will go to the else, then different to say what? 3 minus 1, which is 1. So it will return 1 outside. This is outside. So x will equal to what? Minus, sorry, so x equal to 1. This is the value of x outside the function. This is outside the function. Another function here does not take no parameter and does not return anything. So you can see there's no return here, okay? So this function has its own I, variable I is contain 1 here, and it's integer, and j is include what? The value of 6 here, and the div variable, so the div variable here is equal to I divided by j, which is 1 over 6. It will be some value, and just to print the statement and print the result of div without returning any value. So you can see that the function can take parameter and sometimes does not take parameter. And the function also could return a value of type, of specific type, or if it is void, that does not mean it is not returning anything. If there is a type like here, return type, then the function need to have what? A return statement with a variable with the same type here. If it is void, there is no return statement at all. So this is basically some type of the functions. This is how you call the function, and we call the variable when we send the variable values to the function. When we send this value to the function, we call them argument. We call them what? Argument. And when the function receive them, what do we call them? We call them here what? We call them parameter. We call them what? Parameter. So if you send an argument, it will be received as what? As a parameter. And this is the demonstrate how it has to be in the same order. So if for example this is a function, this function take x, integer x, take integer x, and this is integer, sorry, and take also y, Y is what? Y is double. Okay, and when you call the function, you call it like calculate, and you change the order. You put the first one 2.1, for example, for comma, and you put 5 here. Okay, so this is wrong. Why? Because it has to receive at the beginning what? An integer, and you put double. So this will give you what? Will give you an error. So it has to be in the same order, 5 and 2.1. It has to be in the same order as you specified in the function when you send the argument. So the parameter and the argument has to be in the same order, in the same type exactly. And if you mix it, that will produce an error from the program. Great. Okay. So this is how you call it, and we say the order is important. And this one, for example, will give you an error because, as we explained, you change the type. Supposed to be an integer, and you send what? Supposed to be an integer, and you send here double, and which is give you an error. The main method now, when you create a project in Java, actually, it will contain what? It contain a number of classes. So this is your project and obtain this class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4, and so on. Many classes, could be thousands of classes. So when you run the program, which class should the program start running from? Okay, so this is a problem. He cannot decide. So the program is already known and standard that any class that contain the main method, okay, it will start the running from the project, and this class will call the other method in the other class. All right, so this method main will invoke all the other methods from the other classes, and this is the definition of the main. When you create any project, it will be already there in the project. It's a public and static, and it's the return nothing, and the name is always main, and take string as an argument, okay. Now suppose that we have this class, for example. Okay, class is called sample. All right, and this is a separate class. This is what? Separate class called sample. And inside the sample we have a method called what? We have a method inside the sample. We have a method called what? It's called multi. So when you call it from the program, you cannot just say mult. Okay, you cannot just say multi 2 and 3, for example. It will not accept it. It will give you an error. Why is that? Because this is a class. You need to make an instance from the class. You need to create an object from the class. So the better way, because it's external class, so the best way is what to say, to identify, take an instance from the class. We're saying sample. Let's call it, for example, x equal new what? New sample, like taking an instance from the class. And then you say what? And you say x, which is this name, dot dot is necessary, the function name, dot the function name. And this is how it is work. Okay, if it's an external, then you need to use the dot notation in order to call the function inside that class, because everything inside the class is belong to this class, and in order to use it, we have to create an instance from this class. We created an object, we call it x. This is an object. Here we call it an x, and x is contain the same method. So the x dot multi blah blah. If you say multi without the object name, that will give you an error basically. Okay, so this is when you call the function, you can just call it. If it's in the same class, if it's in the same function, the same class, this is the same class. Okay, you can just call the name without the dot notation because it is in the same class. Okay, if it's from a class, different class, then you have to use what? You have to use the dot notation.